Argo is a highly improbable but true story, quite hard to believe, set on a world stage. And I wondered whether, as a director, you've been actively looking for a project that offered you kind of a change of pace and style after the last two movies that you've made.
Well, definitely, and I usually don't pretend to have, tactics or whatever, because I find that as soon as you start planning for something, that's when, something entirely different presents itself. But what I wanted to do was do a movie outside of Boston, because I thought I'll eventually just get pigeonholed as the sort of Boston crime director. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want to tell, different stories as well. And then when this script came along, not only was it great, it had this kind of sprawling, it was period, and it was set in Iran and Turkey and California and DC. So I thought, well, I found what I was looking for.
And you also star in the film as well as Tony Mendez, an ex-CIA exfiltration man, an unsung hero for obvious reasons until fairly recent years. What did you admire about him and the way that he served his country at that time?
What was interesting about Tony was I was expecting when I met him, I don't know why, like a sort of some kind of macho, gunslinger kind of karate guy or whatever. And instead, he was extremely quiet. He wanted to sort of fade into the background. You never would have picked him out of a lineup as a spy. And then I realized that was probably by design, and I liked that idea. And so I tried to put that into the performance.
And there's light relief in the movie as well. There's brilliant juxtaposition between what's going on in Iran and in Hollywood from Alan Arkin and John Goodman. Why were they right for their roles, and can you tell us a bit about who they play in the movie?
Alan Arkin plays a guy who's like a sort of legendary producer who's, done a lot of, maybe great or semi-great movies and is in the waning years of his career, but, still kind of thinks he's a genius. And he's based on a guy, but there's been some changes. John plays literally, John Chambers, who is the first guy who won an Oscar for makeup, and he was the head of makeup for Warner Brothers. And for many, many years, he worked with the CIA, providing them disguises, providing them, material to do these kinds of exfiltrations. So he's a really interesting guy. He was given the CIA's highest civilian honor, and he's sort of the Brando of makeup artists. Like if you ask any makeup artist, they'll all say, "Oh yeah," because he sort of started the fancy makeup, Battle of the Apes type, prosthetics and things like that.
Yeah. And I gather that you made the actors who play the hostages in the Canadian embassy kind of live together for a week without, certain devices beginning with an I.
Yeah.
How did they kind of cope with that, and why did you want to make them do it?
I wanted to make them do it because I think there's a subconscious thing when you know somebody well, the way you behave around them, versus when you're not as comfortable with them. And, you can read that, and I didn't want them to feel look uncomfortable with one another, because they're supposed to have been, hiding out together for weeks on end. So, I also want to kind of immerse them in the period so that they could improvise in the period, so that they had frames of reference from movies, newspapers, magazines, so that they'd be listening to records on vinyl and making phone calls on, hard lines, that kind of thing. And so they agreed to do this. And but giving up the phones was tough. I mean, it was really like peeling them out of their hands. I think now they've kind of grown into our bodies almost.
Elements of the film have a kind of documentary feel to them. It's very authentic period detail. How much access did you have to archive material, and how did that help you?
One of the nice things about doing a period movie, but one that's as recent as this, is that there's a huge amount of material. The news was being filmed, so you have all that stuff. There was the television has been archived from that era, so anything that was on TV you have. And there was a lot of photography. So, I mean, it was just like volumes and volumes of research. And so what we were able to do is, if we had some scene that we wanted to do, we were able to reproduce it almost exactly. We had great production designers and people in the art department, and that was invaluable.
I know you mentioned before you don't necessarily have plans, but you've just passed a sort of milestone birthday as well. What are your plans, if you do have any ambitions, for the kind of next phase of your career?
As I said, I have to kind of knock on wood, and I hesitate to make too many plans. But what I want to do in terms of, I don't know, how I approach my work is to continue to have the discipline to direct movies that I really believe in and I think are kind of interesting, and resist doing things for the wrong reasons. And I feel that this is, there's a couple people I've talked to, including I ran into Morgan Freeman. And I was saying to him, yeah, I just turned 40. And he was like, boy, you're coming right into your prime. And so I thought, all right, Morgan says this is the prime of your life. It's got to be true, even if it's a bad impersonation. So I'm excited. This is the time when my kids are really growing, and I'm doing things that I really like in my career So it's a good time for me.
Ben Affleck, thanks very much.
Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.